I love woodland photography and creating painterly images like these. And in this video, what I'm going to do is show you the techniques just in Lightroom to create these images, and it's easier than you think.
A big thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring this week's video.
So we were lucky enough recently to have another amazing foggy morning. I didn't do a lot of video. I went and took photos. I was walking pebbles. As you can see here, she had a great time in the mud. And I thought to myself, why don't I do another video that's sort of the third one in the series really. The first one was me out in the woodland 2 or 3 weekends ago. Then I talked a little bit about composition in woodland photography, and this is sort of the end bit really, the editing section. So I'm going to go through my editing techniques in Lightroom and go through some of the images that I took a few weekends ago and some of the ones that I took yesterday, in a hope that it'll help you get more painterly images. Now, I would say that obviously fog does help create that painterly look, but I'll show you with a few images that you can get it without fog as well. Right, so I've got a few images here and I'm going to just sort of go through and talk about the basics first. So this is an image that I took in Padley Gorge in the Peak District, and this is straight out of camera, which looks pretty good to begin with, but I really think I can make it look a lot better than that. And I've got a few basic things that I do first. So the first thing I do is, the profile that I import is usually my camera standard profile. You can mess around with this and try different profiles. So like landscape is going to give you a more vivid one, neutral is going to start with the neutral tones. Sometimes I start with a different tonality in the image based on those initial imports, but usually it's camera standard. Then I just mess about with the white balance just to see, and it looks in this image, I don't want it to go cool. It's definitely going to be on the warmer side, and I'll get it about right, which is probably about there. And then the tint, again, I don't want to go too green with this because it's very green anyway. So by going a bit more purple, I'm going to pull out some of the redder tones in the bark at the bottom. So I'll probably go about there. Then I get onto the tones, and this is really important because I think it's good to go through the exposure and just go really low and see where your distracting highlights are. So there's a few bits of sky here that I want to try and get rid of at some point. And then I want to go a lot lighter and just look at what the shadow's like. So I can see that there's not a lot of noise in this. It looks pretty good. And there's definitely detail to pull out in the trunks here, which I can do. And then I'll set my exposure about right. So maybe about there. I'd obviously underexpose this a little bit. I usually increase the contrast a little bit, but I'm going to pull that back later. I'll explain that in a minute. Highlights I don't usually touch too much. Shadows I definitely want to pull up. One of the things that I'll talk about a lot is the blacks. To create that painterly look, the blacks in a woodland images are very rarely black, true black. So here you can see we've got some true blacks. If the histogram is to the left here and there's tonality and peaks to the left, then you've got black. So if I move this way, you can see that now there's a lot of detail here in the histogram, and there's a lot of blacks in the image. Alternatively, if I move it all the way that way, then you can see that I've got less at this end, and there's a lot less blacks in the image. I'm going to just push that up a little bit and push the whites up a little bit, but I'm going to do some more with a curve to sort of help that a little bit in a minute. Then I'm just going to set the texture and clarity to 0 for now, but I'm going to come back to that. And then usually with the vibrance and saturation, I just reduced it a little bit. So maybe go down to 6 on both. Then the key thing, and also what I would say is that Lightroom's meant to be done from the top down. So I'm just going down the tools here, and in this basic edit, I'm just going to show you the things that I will do in the first pass before I get onto masks. So here, what I want to do, if I bring this up, it means that anything that's black will never be able to be true black. So if I just took it to mid-grey, then all the blacks are now mid-grey in the image. Now, obviously that looks awful. I don't want that. But I don't want anything to be true black because that's the painterly look that I always go for. Likewise, I actually don't want anything to be true white either. And then what I do is I usually just put a little bit of an S curve on this, but I will come back to that. Now, these blacks definitely are too black in this image, so I will come back to that shortly. So then the colour mixer, I'm going to go through this on a more colourful image, because obviously on just a green image it's not particularly amazing to use. So I've got some autumn images as well. But on the greens, it's definitely a good idea just to mess with them. You don't want them to look like they've been produced in a lab. And likewise, you don't want them to look yellow, but I actually like them to edge on the more olive side. So I usually reduce the green here, and likewise with the yellow a little bit. And then this is where I add in the saturation. So now I'll add in a bit of saturation in the greens, and I'll probably remove some saturation in the blues and purples. And then luminance, I want to probably just pull a little bit of the green luminance up. So already we've gone from sort of that to that. It's already looking loads better just with the basic edits. Then colour grading. Sometimes I do that, sometimes I don't. If I do that, then I'll probably just, in the highlights, just get some oranges. In the shadows, I'll just put some blues. And I think it works quite well with this. Again, I just can look, by clicking this little eye here, I can see what it looked like before and after, and it's not changing a lot, but it's just warming up those highlights in the image, which look really good. Okay, sharpening I don't touch. Profile, enable chromatic aberrations, enable profile correction for the lens. I'm not going to do any of those things. The vignette I do manually, which I'll talk about in the masking section. And then calibration, this is really important. So in here, I find that on especially woodlands, if you change the hue of the blue primary, it's a more effective way of getting those olive colours. So again, if I go this way, it's going to create really insipid greens that I don't really like that much. But if I go this way, can you see it almost separates out the green tonality? So in the trunk, I've got a more olive green, but I'm keeping this sort of lush green here. Going that way, it makes them all look the same. Going this way, it separates them out more. So I find that just pulling this down a little bit can help to separate it out. So again, I've gone from that to that, and it's starting to look pretty good, I think. I like that quite a lot. So then what I would do is go on to masking, and masking is, there's so many things you can mask. I usually mask by either selecting colours or luminosity when I'm doing woodlands, and then I combine that with different shapes of masking and sometimes use the brush. So let me explain. I'm going to show you some different photos in a minute as well. So what I'm going to do first of all is I am just going to do a radial filter. So I'm just going to do a radial gradient, and I'm going to do it, this is where the sun was, so I'm just going to do it a really big one about there. Now obviously if I increase the brightness of that, it's going to increase the brightness of the branches as well, which I don't want to do. I just want it to increase the brightness in the background, but more importantly I want to soften that background a little bit by doing some negative dehaze. So what I'm going to do is I'm now going to intersect that. By doing that, you click Option on the Mac and click Intersect, and then I'm going to say with luminance range. And what I can do then is I can select just the bright tones. Now I can either just do that and it will just give me a selection, but what I like to do is sort of feather it out more than that. So I'm going to feather it out to about there. Now obviously that still looks a bit wrong because I've added too much exposure, but I did that just to see what the mask was doing. So I'm going to reduce that exposure, probably just do it on the whites there, a little bit of the shadows, but it's not going to affect the shadows too much because the shadows are here and I've already deselected those with the luminance mask. Now I want to warm that up a bit more, and most importantly, I just want to do some negative dehaze on that just to give it a little bit of a glow. But I'm going to come back to this in a minute because I've got a technique that you can use similar to this in Lightroom that doesn't do it quite as good, but does it a sort of an autumn effect, so you don't have to go into Photoshop, which is the sort of final touch to create these painterly images. So we're getting there now. I've gone from that to that, and it's looking pretty good, I think. So then I probably want to just pull out some of the detail in here. So what I might do is then go and do a color range and just select these greens here. Now, obviously when I do that, then it's going to select all the greens. There's lots of greens in this image. But what I can do is I can just go and change it, and I'm going to add some contrast and add some saturation in that. But I don't want it to do it to everything. I just want it to do it to where the branch is. To do that, I'm going to click intersect with brush. Now wherever I paint will paint that effect, but it will only paint it on top of that other mask that was selected on the greens. So I'm going to have quite a small brush, and I'm just going to paint on where I want that. So I want it on there, probably want it on here, probably make a little bit bigger brush for there. Maybe have it in these greens on the background there. I just want to highlight some of the areas of these greens just to bring them out and create a bit of a more of a punch. Now, obviously you can see what you've done by just growing that up. That's awful. You don't want to do that, but it's just creating a little bit of a punch there. Now I think that's probably too much because I've added too much saturation. But it's just really, really subtle. Now the thing I then do, and we'll go into another image next, is I just go and mess with the temperature a little bit, because I feel like on this image I might be able to cool it down a little bit more. Yeah, I can. I think what I'm gonna do is cool it down a bit more and then go back into this mask and just warm that up a bit more. I want it to be a warm glow, but a cool woodland. So warm in the sort of top left and cooler as it goes into the image. To have a sort of separation of colours. So we've gone from that to that. So that's looking pretty good. Obviously I've got to do one more technique, which I'll come back to later in the video on this. So I'm working on some woodland presets at the moment. I'm going to be launching those soon. If you're interested in them, I was hoping to get them ready for this video, but I haven't quite got them ready. I've got like a small selection of them ready, and then I've got some others that are in development. I'm hoping to have maybe around about 16 presets that are specific for woodland photography. If you're interested in them, then there's a link in the description below to sign up for my newsletter, and I'll send out an offer for 50% off when I launch them. So make sure you're signed up for my newsletter below. That's all managed with Squarespace, which are this week's sponsor of the video. If you're looking for a website or a domain and you want to start your business or share your photos online, then Squarespace is a fantastic platform for doing that. I've been using it for years and years and years, and you're also in control of how those images are displayed on your website. You can set up newsletters like I've just talked about now, and you can sell your images, your prints. Even if you want to sell a calendar at Christmas, then it's a fantastic platform to do that. There's a link in the description, and you can get 10% off by using squarespace.com/Nigel or offer code Nigel. Go and check them out now. Right, I am going to go and talk about color and this image, and what I would do with this, I'll just do a quick edit on it. So I'm just going to brighten it up, increase the contrast, increase the shadows, increase the blacks, just do this curve a little bit. I'm just going to add a bit of contrast there. So already I've increased the colors, but what I want is more separation between the yellows and the reds in this image. And this is where I find that the color mixture is really good. So let me explain. So in this image, there's quite a few of oranges and yellows are the main two colors. So you can see oranges are there. That looks awful. But you can see I can make it more yellow, the orange, or I can make it more red. And basically when you move it to the left here, it's going more towards this color. And when you move it to the right, it's going more towards this color. So if I move that way and this that way, everything's going to look the same because I'm moving these together. So they're getting closer together, these two colors. So if I move the other way, so if I move this one backwards and make it redder and this one make it more green, then you can see I can get more separation. And that's a really, really good technique for making things pop in autumn. So you can see that what I've done is I've just separated these colors a little bit. And you can do that as much as you want. And then you can also change the luminance of it. So maybe I want to, actually in this case, I want to reduce the luminance of the orange, I think, just to pull out the detail in those trees at the top. And then again, you can add some color in the highlights and make the shadows a little bit bluer. And that's like really good. I mean, it's so simple to do that. And quite often I'll mess around with these quite a bit. I usually on the hue just go down from the top to the bottom and just move them really hard from left to right just to see what it does. And then, you know, obviously most of these are not going to do anything. It's mostly yellows and reds in this. And oranges. So that's a top technique for autumn photos. We're getting into autumn, fall at the moment. The next thing I want to talk about is trunks. And when you've got dark trunks like this in an image, so this is an autumn image, I've done a bit of an edit on it, but I've got these really dark trunks in it, and I want to take these trunks and just pull out some of the detail in the trunks. This is where the curve tool is really good. So you can see by the histogram here, most of my tonality is in this section here in the darker area. There's a little bit of tonality in the sort of mid-high tones, but most of it's in the dark area, which is this trunk and all this down here and this area here. So what I can do is I've just put 2 points on the histogram, or 3, there's already one there. I put one there and one there. What I can do is just move this one up a little bit, and you can see it's starting to move the mid-tones up a bit. But what I want to do is actually move these up. So by moving this one up now, you'll see I'll pull out some of the tonality, and I don't want that to go flat, because if that goes flat, you'll see that you get really weird sort of greys in it. So that's why I put that other one in there. I just want that to go a bit higher. And this is just going to allow me to pull out some of that tonality. So I've gone from that to that. And I find mostly when you're doing woodlands, this is not always the case, but mostly when you're doing woodlands, you want your trunks not to be really dark. And in some cases, you want them to be even less dark than that. So also on this, I could probably just pull this up a little bit so there's no true black, and then maybe just tweak these a little bit more. And I think that looks way better than that. Now, what I've done now is, can you see I've flattened this bit off here, which when the curve is flatter, it means there's less contrast. What I might want to do is just bring this down and then just add another one here, and this will just make the highlights just pop a little bit more, because I'm just adding it a little bit steeper. So yeah, so that's pretty good. And then I probably want to introduce some more saturation into those colors as well. The other thing is, if you have a shot like this, where again, the histogram's covering the whole distance, I don't think you necessarily need the histogram to cover the whole distance. In this shot, there was no blacks, but in here, I've got the histogram going all the way to the blacks. So in this case, I'm going to really push that up and have, you know, a very soft image, so that it's not like that, but it's more like that, which is more ethereal. Now, obviously you can play with that quite a lot. You can also do the same with these tools as well. Really, the tonal tools here do the same as what the tone curve does. The tone curve just gives you a little bit more control over it. So you can go and mess with that, and just remember that you don't need blacks in your image, especially when it's foggy. If it's been foggy, it's very, very unlikely you're going to have a black in the image. And if you go and do it like this, and I just have an S-curve like this and make it really, really contrasty, it's going to look a bit odd, I think, and it's not going to have that sort of ethereal, painterly look that often I think looks way better and more mysterious when you're shooting woodlands. So yeah, just think about moving it up a little bit like that. So I'll just quickly show you this image. So this was an image that I took yesterday when I was with Pebbles, and you can see in the video here that Pebbles ran through the scene. But this was a really, really nice scene, and this is a good example of something I'm working on with my presets. This is a preset I've had for ages, actually, that I use all the time. So if I just apply my Woodland Green Glow 2, you can see that it just works really well with this. It creates sort of really nice, sort of soft, mysterious look to it. And then basically what you've got to do is on this one, obviously, I'll probably want to go and crop it. Maybe do I keep that one in? No, I think I'll cut that out. So to about there, and then this is just a little bit bright, I think. So just reduce it a little bit, but that is starting to look really good. And again, I think I'll probably just lift the blacks up a little bit. But this look here, I'll explain how to do it, but a lot of my presets already have that inbuilt in various amounts as well. So let me go back to this image here and explain how I can create even softer, more ethereal look here. So what I do, and you can do this with the Autumn effect in Photoshop, is to do it in Lightroom, what I do, and it's a bit of a hack and it's not quite as good as Photoshop, but it works, is I create a luminance range. Again, just select the bright tones. And then I just alter that again, so it's going from sort of mid blacks to the highlights, and then it's just feathering off as it's going to the mid black. So most of it's applying to the highlights. Now I might change this later, but then what I do is I warm that up. So I've already done this, if you remember, but I'm also, the key thing here is I'm going to put quite a lot of negative clarity into it. And what that does is just in those highlight areas, it reduces the clarity of it, creates a lot more of a soft look. So again, if we just do a before and after, you can see it's just softening. Can you see in the sky area there? It's just softening it and creating a better glow, and it's hiding the sky a little bit, I think, where it's poking through, or where it is poking through, it's making it softer. And I think that works really, really well. It's almost the same as the Autumn effect, but not quite as good. And in Photoshop, you've got a little bit more control. The tools that I tend to use are just negative clarity is important, a little bit of temperature. Sometimes I might mess with the whites, but usually I've got the picture about right before I apply this. This is probably the last thing that I do. And the final thing that I might use is here, I might just tone the colors a little bit more if I really want to push it. I think that's way too much, to be honest. So in this one, I don't think it works very well, but it's worth having a look and seeing, you know, whether it's worth it or not. And then when you've done that, you've got an amount slider, so you can then reduce or increase the amount that you've applied that. So you can then play with it afterwards. It's a really good way of doing it. You can then obviously rename that and put Autumn, Lightroom Autumn effect or something like that. Like I say, my presets that are coming out soon will have that in. And that is the basics of the things that I do to create my painterly shots. Just to highlight the things in order again, go through the basics, the basic edit, the tone curve's really important, making sure that you probably don't have too many blacks, because that's not a very painterly look. If you think about watercolors, then very rarely you have blacks in watercolors. You mostly have sort of mid-tones. And then having a glow, a softness, and you can do that in lots of different ways. So in sort of an image like this, then I might apply that radial gradient there. And then don't forget, you've got to intersect it with, you could do it with color range sometimes, but it's better with luminance range. And then on that, you can make it warmer if you want to, but the key thing is just to do some negative dehaze to create that glow. And then you can increase the white a little bit. Now on that particular case, I don't think that radial gradient's big enough, so I'll probably make it a bit bigger. Just, yeah, and that, again, if you do the before and after, just creates a bit of a glow in the background. It's really, really good. And then if you add on to that Autumn, that Lightroom Autumn effect, then you can get something really special. I hope this has been useful. Make sure you sign up for my newsletter below if you're not already, and I'll send out that discount code for 50% off my woodland presets when I launch them in the next few days. Thanks ever so much for watching, and until next Sunday, bye.